Over the years, you've heard me ask wealth manager Warren Ingram the big questions. How do we invest wisely? How do we protect our family's future? All those conversations, that entire library of financial expertise is now available as a podcast. Straightforward advice to help you build your wealth on demand. Just search for Warren Ingram's Personal Finance wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
You're listening to the best of The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Welcome to the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the most important insights, thoughts, comments, and opinions from the week that we've just been through. You may find that some of them are really worth sharing with a friend, someone about to make a big decision, or someone who you think just needs a little bit more context before they actually go ahead and do whatever it is they're going to do with their money. It might just be worth sharing it with them on WhatsApp or something like that. Go to your podcast app and search for The Money Show. To start, some of the news stories that really did dominate the week. Obviously, the fact that the US President Donald Trump saying he'll impose a 30% tariff on all of our imports to the US from the 1st of August really being the big story, had a big market reaction to that. And of course, in the middle of that, no one really knows what's actually going to happen come the end of the month. The police minister, Senzo Mchunu, facing serious claims that he's involved in a criminal syndicate. They were made. The claims came strangely from the provincial police commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal and Ntlanhla Mkhwanazi. Lots of calls for the president to act on that. He's promised that he will and that it'll be over this weekend. So very much worth just paying attention to that. And then Discovery, the government employees medical scheme and med scheme have been accused of acting unfairly and in a racially discriminatory manner towards black healthcare providers. This came from an independent panel that was formed on behalf of the medical aid schemes, the Council for Medical Schemes that's been looking at this. The medical aid schemes very, very angry in their response to this. Tonight, we bring you a mixture of stories from the world of money from the week that has been. This week's episode of your business book review, Faiz Siddiqui, author of Hubris Maximus, The Shattering of Elon Musk, looking at some of the big controversies Musk has been involved in and how he almost seems to court trouble. Siddiqui has a thought-provoking perspective on Musk's public persona.
I think, we've seen the proof kind of play out regarding his dispute with the president of the United States. We've seen sort of the proof of the idea, I suppose. I think the book gives readers a preview of the way that these spats played out with regulators, as you mentioned, or safety investigators, or officials at every possible level of government or official life. Musk would engage in what seemed like at times petty disputes or disputes that were not necessarily helpful to his businesses, but they were to advance what he believed was right. And we've seen this dynamic now play out with a person who some might argue is the most powerful in the world. That attitude of Musk's extends even to the presidency of the United States.
You detail in one account there was an investigation into one of his cars that was involved in an accident. And it really mattered because it was about the sort of quote-unquote auto-driving feature of a Tesla, right?
Sure.
And he's speaking to, I think it's you call it the National Traffic Safety Board in the US. He's actually being interviewed formally over the phone by an investigator, and halfway through, he gets so annoyed that he just put the phone down. I mean, that's an astonishing sort of insight into his character.
Right. I mean, and companies, who have been under the microscope and, this type of scrutiny from the National Transportation Safety Board have obviously, reacted, not reacted positively, right, to those types of investigations. But the seeming breach of the established protocols to conduct this kind of investigation and the lack of recognition of the goal, which, for the NTSB at that point seemed to be gathering information in the interest of advancing safety at any cost, even if it has to be an uncomfortable conversation. That lack of recognition from Musk was evident early on. He just does not want to play that game if it's going to result in discomfort, unexpected or unwanted scrutiny, or potentially get in the way of his broader ambitions.
There's been acres of what we used to say newsprint, but by which I mean discussion here and commentary about whether part of Elon Musk's character and the way he's behaved in the US is because of his upbringing here, and whether it's a sign of maybe, I don't know, the sort of time in which he was growing up, a sign of disrespect of authority, or maybe just feeling that he's better than everyone else. That didn't seem to be a big feature of your book necessarily, but I mean, do you think that's, I mean, do you think Americans see it like that he's like that because he's from here?
I think I have encountered that attitude. Obviously, as you mentioned, it's not a feature, of discussion in the book. But I do think it occurs to people that, maybe the specific conditions of Musk's upbringing and some of what I do go into, the bullying he faced as a child, or, his family life, this idea of competition, of, a zero-sum game, these things factoring into his business and, managerial style. It's not like a, completely foreign idea. Do Americans view it that way? I think certainly this question came up at a time when the Trump administration was looking to take in immigrants from South Africa, as you know well.
The issues around Twitter, around X, and I mean, I'm someone who years ago used to love X and now haven't tweeted for over a year just because he seems to have destroyed it. And maybe it was heading that way anyway. But at one point, you say he sent an email to employees that they had to commit to, quite enjoyed this phrase, hardcore Twitter. An astonishing thing to say, but the writing was on the wall. He was going to turn X into what it is.
Yeah, I mean, and this is another area where there seems to be a principle at play. It's this free speech absolutism, free speech maximalism, let's welcome back individuals or accounts whose suspension Musk objected to. But then as the book lays out, there were times when there seemed to be arbitrary decision making that worked in Musk's favor, where, there were accounts that were not necessarily Musk's favorite, who were subjected to discipline or were not, accepted on the platform. If you look at journalists in particular, if you look at an account that was tracking the location of Musk's private jet and the treatment of that account. So for all of the discussion that Twitter then became this cesspool and it was in the interest of free speech, there were now questions about whether Musk was actually abiding by the tenet that he laid out, which was free speech absolutism.
There's a quote that there's a graveyard of his enemies. It's a quote ascribed to him, actually. There is a long list of people who've gone up against him, and most of them have kind of been flattened. How's he been able to run over so many people so strongly? I mean, obviously he is clever. I mean, let's just accept that. But there must be something more to it. There's a force of personality.
I think that is an area where the comparisons to President Trump seem strongest, right? These are individuals who repeatedly have not faced the same consequences as, comparable individuals in their positions would, right? And so how has Musk been able to, I suppose, get away with it all? He has this platform, and he now there's a platform that he now owns, which allows him tremendous influence. He is also the richest person in the world, and for a time he was a close ally and key advisor to the U.S. president. So it's just an illustration of the power and the concentrated power that he has commanded.
I was a little bit surprised that, look, like everybody, we kind of expected a bust up between Musk and Trump. But on all things, the issue of US government debt, it's not sexy, it's not interesting, it's very important. Musk may actually be on the right side of the argument. Do you think this was a relationship that they were just looking for the right rock to break it on?
Not necessarily, and I take the point, but not necessarily, because if you look at Musk's history, when he has a goal in mind, and there can be arguments on whether that is the right goal, whether that is the righteous thing to do, whether it's morally the correct principle. But when he has a goal in mind, it is difficult to deter him from that specific goal. And that's a personality trait that I like to think is, laid out repeatedly within the book, that, if he is focused on one aspect of the company or one of the areas of technology that he's overseeing, he cannot be deterred from that easily. And, cutting federal spending and reducing the national debt was one of the tenets he laid out. Of course, people wonder, like, why is he so focused on that? He's hinted at, like, it's in service of this other goal to, get humanity to Mars. So if he sees it as genuinely obstructing the goal, it stands to reason that, all right, he is now going to, mount a fight against it.
He's not going to change course, is he? He's not going to change behavior. It's worked for him. That's how he'll see it. He's clever and better than everyone else. And I mean, this is how he is.
I mean, I was frankly a bit surprised that he dialed back his attacks on Trump. And, he even said, he regretted that some of it seemed to have gone too far. That felt like recognition that, maybe this was not a fight that would serve his best interests. But yeah, no, in general, he is not someone to back down.
That was Faiz Siddiqui, the author of Hubris Maximus, The Shattering of Elon Musk, a sharp and critical lens, really, on Musk and the controversies around him.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
The best of the Money Show from this week.
On How I Make My Money this week, Susie Goodman, the Executive Director of Strauss Co, sharing her insights into really an astonishing journey that she's had, moving in the end to managing Africa's leading art auction house, someone who is an art auctioneer and has had a really interesting ride over the way, and particularly interesting in some of what she learned in other countries. Susie Goodman, an amazing story.
And luckily, I also have a few genes in my family. Both my mother studied art in Johannesburg, and my dad was a wildlife photographer. So I suppose the apple didn't fall very far from the tree, but they certainly weren't involved in auctions.
Okay. And at the time when you started studying history of art, did you think this is what I was going to do? Because there aren't many ways to make money with that degree.
You're absolutely right. No, I actually also did take geography just as a sideline because I thought maybe I better branch out a bit. But I was very lucky. I realized that actually there are many different facets to the art world, and auctioneering is actually something that lots of people don't talk about or don't know about, and particularly in this part of the world. The secondary market is a small market. So I was lucky. I did a postgraduate degree that taught me about the magic of the auction world and how you can sell anything. And I did think that I'd be a jewelry specialist, which is, as much as I love jewelry, I like too many things now, so I think maybe I'm more of a generalist.
Okay, so I mean, of the number of times that I've seen an auction, I haven't seen many. I do remember as a child watching someone on the side of a road just auctioning whatever it was that they had, and I found it fascinating. There's clearly something that you find, I don't know if it's a vibe, a feeling, but something mesmerizing about a good auction.
There certainly is. And actually, just as a sideline story, I was asked by CITO, as you know, which is a training institute in this country, to help be involved in training auctioneers. And I had to say that I experienced the wide variety of auctioneers. So you have cattle auctioneers, car auctioneers, property auctioneers, art auctioneers. And I sometimes think that's quite fun because we talk very differently. So there was a wonderful Zimbabwean auctioneer who sells tobacco, and he started before me, and he was going like that, and I was like, oh my goodness. And I had to come after him and go 2,000, 2,200, 2,500. So it was quite amusing. But the thing that grabs me about an auction is that it's the culmination of an amazing journey of finding artworks to sell on behalf of the seller, and obviously presenting them to the future buyer, and then working with the buyer and putting and placing them in a collection. But the bit about auctions that really, really grabbed me is that you don't really know what's going to happen on the night, because yes, you've got a value, yes, you've got a reserve, yes, you've got people interested, But if you have all of the ingredients and you've got 2 or 3 people who land up fighting for it, you can the numbers get bigger and the excitement gets bigger and the adrenaline drives faster. And I think that's the bit I just love, that magic, is that the ultimate price is defined when the hammer falls. So I like that drama. I love the fact that you don't know who's going to be on the phone or who's going to be in the room. So for me, it's an amazing privilege to be able to sell art this way.
I mean, it's interesting that actually quite a few movies that, now that I think about it, have scenes involving auctions because of that inherent drama. It's actually, I imagine, being part of it is far better than watching anyone trying to create a fictional account of it.
It absolutely is, and I'm sure you realize that a few weeks ago we sold a painting for 31 million rand, and I promise you could have heard not only a pin drop, but you could hear everyone inhaling as the price grew and exhaling as the next person bid, and you can't make it up. It's the most extraordinary sensation, but also it's like a performance, but it's not really a performance because it's real life. So I think that's the bit that it does capture you. It is evocative, so you're right. There are lots of movies that have very good-looking people taking auctions, and there tends to be sort of a Thomas Crown affair moment when something gets pinched off the wall. But luckily for us, that doesn't happen too often. So it does create the sort of magic of, I suppose, prestige and celebrities and numbers. But I often remind people that we auction things with just as much passion for 1,000 rand as we do for maybe R1 million. R1 million gets a bit scary, but we do sell all varieties of pricing by auction.
And I mean, is there as much excitement when something that's relatively low cost is suddenly increasing in value as opposed to something you expect to go for a lot? I mean, in a way, something you expect to go for 1,000 rand going for 2,000 is a lot more exciting than something you expect to go for R1 million going for 1.2.
Absolutely. And actually the bit that, Stephen, that sometimes is the really humbling bit is that because we deal with the people who's selling, often we know the story about why someone's selling. And so you can see the person who's brought the work in for evaluation day, and perhaps they're very desperate for some money, or they're trying to pay their university fees, or they're trying to put a deposit down on a house, and they've got this sort of the whole lot of works of art that they're hoping they can realize a little bit of money towards those dreams. And then those works start climbing. And the sheer amazement when somebody thinks they're getting 1,000 rand and they get 2,500 rand, or they're thinking something, which we valued at 5,000 rand, suddenly people are fighting over it and we sell it for 25,000 rand. Those moments are so incredible and are so joyful. There is also the sad side when someone is desperately needing it and then something doesn't sell, and that's hard because that also is the reality of our business. Not everything finds a home, as much as we try to find homes, but it's that sort of emotion of you're not quite sure. We say it's this value and then it goes for the right amount or it goes above it, and that moment is also quite exciting.
Are there certain things that you find this happens to, this sort of level of excitement, than others? And I'm presuming in my own head, I'm thinking that this must happen to works of art where you get a much higher price, a much more exciting auction than almost anything else. I mean, yes, maybe they're fancy cars or Elon Musk's mug or something, but I'm presuming it's art where you're more likely to have that happen.
I think you're right, because there is, as a lot of people know, art is not it's not bread or milk or your necessities. It's an amazing privilege to have a piece of art, own it. It gives you joy. It gives a different satisfaction to an essential necessity. So I think there's which comes with auctions is that amazing feeling of I love it. I've fallen in love with it. I like it. I want to collect it. I need to own it. I would love to have it on my wall. So there's emotion in it that sometimes is a little bit less. Is very different to maybe somebody who's trying to buy a car at a second-hand auction, because that's probably just a pure transactional fact. But the bit that is special about those moments in the auction world, you have stories, and an artwork keeps that story with it. Because if somebody, for example, bought it from the artist and has owned it in their collection for a while, and they knew the artist and they follow on and say they made it for a wedding or they made it for a birthday, those stories keep going with the picture as much as we can hopefully retell it. Or there's a wonderful story about who owns something, or it was in the collection, as you know, you mentioned somebody like David Bowie. All of those things have stories that I bought something from a David Bowie's collection. What it encourages evocative, competitive bidding, because you want a slice of it. And that you don't get when you're doing secondhand cars, for sure.
There is some artwork which is incredibly controversial. I can think of one example. I spent as an EWN reporter a couple of days outside a gallery which bears the same name that you do.
Yes.
Very controversial artwork.
Yes.
And that, I mean, that it must have come as a surprise to all involved then. I think it did. But there must be times when you look at a piece of work and you think, sure, there's a controversial story, or it's a controversial piece, or the person who created it, or maybe a previous owner is now controversial. And actually, I don't know if I want to touch this.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think that comes with the story of things. And I think the one thing that I've learned about the art world is that there's something for everybody, and there's different tastes for different people, and there are different genres for different subjects. If something has had for example, an artwork that's been damaged, or an artwork that has been, if you take actually, which you reported on, if you take that artwork that we handled, the stolen peony, in a sense, not that we could auction it because it belongs to the state, but the story behind that is so intriguing. I mean, it is. If it ever came up to auction, it would increase in value. I mean, they say in the auction world there are aspects that you always put into value, which is the collection it comes from, how good a piece, what condition it's in, what period it was painted. The wow factor. That work would have a wow factor, and it would cause a stir of excitement because it has such an intriguing story with it. You're right. Not every story you want. Not every story you can, you necessarily, maybe you want to pass on that sense. But you also have to realize that the artwork is still a wonderful artwork, whether you like it or not. It might not be your taste, but it might appeal to somebody else. They tend to, I think that's what's quite nice about art. It tends to find the homes it needs to go to. But I do find the stories intriguing. I mean, when you meet somebody who inherited something or got it from the artist, or, I mean, the other day, because we sold a Tretyakov, there was another client who had a Tretyakov they sold, and they bought it directly from the artist. And her husband died, so she phoned up Tretyakov and said, should I sell it? And he said, absolutely not. You must wait until I'm really, really dead. And, those kind of stories are quite fun, but they make it sort of, I don't know, it's quite nice. If you had it on your wall, you could retell it. So that's a bit, maybe I like the auction world too, because it's about people. Somebody made the art, somebody's going to own it, somebody will own it. So I guess it's the cycle of life, really.
It's an astonishing comment by Tretyakov to say that, but I mean, I'm afraid to say probably correct.
Yes, it is.
When you started, you actually went overseas and you went to Christie's, and they're renowned auctioneers in the UK. Were there many, I mean, I can't think of other places really in South Africa that you could have learnt art auctioneering. I mean, there aren't many options to sort of get into that business.
No, it's a much smaller pool here. I was very lucky to go and work at Christie's, and I was very lucky to try. You have to go through an auctioneering course. I was a little bit cheeky because we went on the course and we were bidding and we were learning how to breathe and to do the increments. And at Christie's, they run the auction book, so where the auctioneer has the estimates and the reserves and the bids, they run it in code. So they use, in case somebody stole the auctioneer's book, they wouldn't be able to read the increments of people's bids that have been left. So they use a sort of code, which is you have to learn. And then you have to do a practice, and there are all of these auctioneers looking at you. And when I started auctioneering, there were only 4 women globally that were auctioneers. So it was quite fun to break some of those barriers. But I was a little bit cheeky because the auctioneer who was sort of running that day said to me, I don't quite understand what you're saying. So I said, oh, which bid? He said, are you saying the bid is on the left, or are you saying the bid is in the lift? And so I thought, oh my goodness. So I said, no, I think maybe it's my accent. So he said, oh, yes, perhaps. And I said, no, aren't we an international company? Wouldn't it be good to have a South African accent? So I was a bit cheeky, but luckily I was able to do it. And it was the first auction I took. I remember standing in the rostrum. South Kensington was a sort of part of the Christie's, but we had King Street and South Kensington. And South Kensington had this wonderful atmosphere of selling house sale contents and silver and furniture. So there was quite a lot of lots, and they let me cut my teeth on a silver sale. And I remember standing up and going, oh my goodness, this is real money. Because until you get to that moment, which is the culmination between the buyer and the seller, it sort of is numbers. But suddenly the reality of like, oh, this is really a lot of money. But it was only £50. But still, I think the nerves and what I was doing was like, oh. But the fun part about it is that you you get your style, you get your flow. I talk fast, as you know, and so I often got the sales that had a lot of lots. So you had to get through 300 lots, and they would say, Susie, you do it because you can talk quickly. But when we were training, and I'm sure other auctioneers maybe have experienced this too, one of the people who was training, I said, sometimes in the middle of an auction, because you can be up there for 2 or 3 hours. They said, sometimes your mind just wanders and you can find yourself thinking, oh my goodness, what's for dinner? And I remember thinking that's impossible because there's too many things between the increments and the clients and the telephone bids and the code. And then one auction was standing there going, oh, should we have chicken or maybe we should have beef? Sure. So you do find your mind is working fast, but it can wander. But the tempo is important. So as I mentioned earlier, cattle auctioneers have a different tempo. We do too. When you're selling something like wine, you definitely go faster than when you're selling, a big Kentridge or an Irma Stern in the millions. You have to sense the room and you have to use the style of bidding and increments that suit what you're selling.
There's so much to it. All right. That was Susie Goodman, the Executive Director of Strauss Co, sharing her expertise and experience in the world of selling art.
Travel isn't just about destinations. It's about the people you meet, the cultures you immerse yourself in, the stories you carry home. I'm Relebogile Mabocha, and on my travel feature, I take you on a journey beyond the guidebook. Each week, I connect with fellow travelers, insiders, and storytellers to bring you the heart of every place. Whether it's a hidden gem right here in South Africa or a dream destination abroad. Join me as we travel through conversations, memories, and inspiration. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
702.
You are listening to The Money Show's best bits.
Your consumer ninja Wendy Knowler this week taking a dive into the hidden dangers of cell phone contracts and particularly what happens when your contract comes to an end and you haven't read the fine print and you don't actually do anything about it. You do have to actually look at that and be very, very careful about what can happen.
Okay, so there are two issues. You mentioned cancelling, and that's one of the big problems because many people don't realize that the contracts don't actually automatically cancel. Rather, you have to still give 30 days, i.e. a month's notice for that to actually happen. But I'm talking about the scenario where people decide that they're not going to cancel and they're not going to renew either. They're just going to let the contract carry on a month-to-month basis. So they're getting the same deal, very similar in most cases historically. And then they don't have the commitment, the strings. They can cancel at any time with 30 days notice and no penalties, right? So that's the benefit of that. But what's happening is that people are finding, sometimes many months later, they think they're still paying the same amount by debit order every month. And then they found out, as Feroza of Durban did, that actually the monthly subscription had gone up, in her case, fivefold, I think if my maths is correct, from 169 Rand a month to around 600 Rand a month.
Sure.
Right. And the point is, she didn't know. She got no notification whatsoever.
So, I mean, okay, so you're paying 169 Rand a month. This is probably a data SIM. They are relatively cheap now.
Data.
The contract ends, and then suddenly it goes up to 600 Rand. Now, there can't be any economical financial justification for that.
Well,
was she told?
No. There's a justification, as they say, well, they have these very promotional discount offers, and when the contract period to which that applies ends, then the contract, if it rolls over month to month, will revert to so-called standard rates. Obviously, this is a strong arm tactic to get people to now commit to another 2-year contract because that's what the networks want. They want this commitment because that works financially for them. But in terms of this case, in Feroza's case, she didn't get any notification. And the point is that the Consumer Protection Act compels companies which offer fixed-term contracts, such as cell phone contracts and gym contracts, to contact them. It's very specific, within 40 to 80 days before the end of that contract period, and spell out the options and the implications of each one. So the idea being, if you want to cancel, you must do it with, give us 30 days notice. If it's going to roll over, this is what's going to happen. It's going to go up to 600 Rand a month. And if you want to renew, here are the options. Well, predictably, the cell phone industry is very good at the marketing of their new offers, but not so great on the detail of, the other options. And in this case, and this is where it got really interesting, MTN said they did notify Feroza, and bearing in mind this is a data-only contract, but they sent her an SMS, which they say, in their words, she was unable to access, right? So in other words, she didn't actually get any notification, and hence the huge bill shock. Yeah.
I mean, I do that with a provider. I have a SIM card in an iPad for data, and I actually wouldn't have the first clue of how to access the SMSs.
No.
I mean, I presume it receives them. I can't imagine why you would use it.
Exactly, and I think the point for me is that this must happen in many cases. So when I took up the case with MTN, they put things right by crediting the amount of what substantial 4,500 rand to Feroza's account, being the difference between her so-called promotional 169 a month and that 600 rand a month, which she'd been charged for months before she realized it. And they've said, we acknowledge this gap in communication and sincerely regret the inconvenience caused. We've engaged with Feroza to explain that whatever. But, as we say, it can't be a lone case.
Do we know how many other MTN data contracts had the same awful surprise?
Well, we'd love to know that, wouldn't we? But it's not the sort of information that gets shared with the media. They did say that notification processes for data-only subscribers were being reviewed, as I said, to improve transparency, and that this is a global thing that happens. These promotional low subscription fees, and then they jump up, and they call it promo drop-off. But I don't know how many people that actually are paying for these contracts know that term and the implication of it. And that's why we want to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the issues around transparency, right? And this is, back to the fine print in the contract. Yes, it's there. Yes, you should be able to understand it's actually, in real terms, not very transparent. What's the industry's track record on this kind of thing?
Well, not good, I have to say. When my own Vodacom contract was coming to an end about 8 months ago, I did get an SMS from the network about that, but it was really shockingly vague. It said, your contract will soon come to an end. Any discounts will fall away. They didn't give me any detail on that. And when, no dates, nothing like that. So when I challenged them, I was told that they use generic messages to ensure we comply with the CPA notifications that are up for renewal, and that when you upgrade, they give you the details. But the point is, what about people who aren't upgrading, that are rolling over, that are going to get caught by a surprise hike? And the Act is very specific. It says that the service provider, in this case the cell phone networks, must, well before the contracts end, notify people of any material changes should they choose not to cancel or commit to a new contract. So they really are playing a bit fast and loose with that requirement. And what I want to do is is warn people that that this can happen, and to be if you don't want to have that huge increase, act accordingly. But if what happened to Feroza happened to you, and you didn't get that notice, specifically data contracts, because they said they should have emailed her, but they only sent her an SMS. If it's happened to you, you are in line for a discount. A refund, just as Feroza was. So go and do those checks.
I wonder sometimes also now, as I get older, life hacks they call it. When you sign any kind of contract, and I've never done this, but it would make sense. If you're signing a cell phone contract for 2 years, actually put in your diary, your electronic diary, which, survives 2 years from now, that actually, the month before, this is what is going to happen, and therefore you need to take action. And that should maybe get you around some of this trouble.
Yes, very, very good advice. And as is, that you put it in the month before, because if you want to cancel, you have to give them that 30-day notice. Otherwise, you end up paying for another month that you really would prefer not to have.
That was your consumer ninja, Wendy Knowler, the often overlooked risks associated in cell phone contracts. Over the years, you've heard me ask wealth manager Warren Ingram the big questions. How do we invest wisely? How do we protect our family's future? All those conversations, that entire library of financial expertise is now available as a podcast. Straightforward advice to help you build your wealth on demand. Just search for Warren Ingram's Personal Finance wherever you get your podcasts.
The best of the Money Show
on 702.
702.
Your shapeshifter this week, Johann Kotzé, the CEO of Agri SA, he reflected on his career journey and his leadership philosophy in the agriculture sector, looking at what he did in Mozambique, what he did in the agricultural sector as a banker, and now, of course, leading Agri SA.
Yeah, no, listen, truly on farming. My great-grandfather was an Italian out of Italy, and he was, I think, the large farmer for us. And then on my mom's side, they grew up in Zambia. So they went to go and farm in Zambia, and my father was also a farmer. So truly a farming community, a typical Afrikaans-speaking Boere farming community.
So were you growing up on a farm yourself?
Yes, I did. And I also farmed myself for 7 years.
Okay. I started by talking about the passion that people have for farming. It seems to me to be something quite different to everything else, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if you have a kind of rational explanation for something that I think is really not about rationality. It's about love and passion.
Yeah, I think it starts in the community. If I can recall my own life, you grow up in a farming community, not knowing anything else than farming, and you live yourself into this dream of being a farmer one day. So I think it's something that is stimulated by being involved in farming from a very young age. And also, I think it's like-minded people being together in a community and just installing it into a little kit and into people. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, I think that the love for nature and the love for what we do is not known. If I recall when I travel overseas and I meet a lot of farmers, it's different in South Africa. I think the passion we have, I think we are conservationists. We love nature. It's something that's so deeply embedded in us and I think that's where that passion comes from.
I often think, and in fact, my children have asked me, how is it possible for someone to be a doctor that looks after ill children? And I always say to them, well, you must see children in the most awful way, but you must also watch them walk out of the hospital because you've cured them. As a farmer, you must watch crops grow, animals grow from nothing to, mighty stalks of maize or, very valuable beef and things like that. There must be something very rewarding in that.
Stephen, I could recall as a kid that my father would take me when they started after the first rains to plow, to walk behind the plow and look at the little birds, the eagles coming in and looking for little worms. I could remember him putting his hands into the soil, and then literally he would touch the soil and he would bring it to me and say, "Can you smell it?" So that reward is, and I think it never goes away. Not farming now, if I travel and I see a little lamb, or I see, say, for instance, goats, and little goats just hopping around, I will stop and have a look and enjoy the moment thereof. That reward is so deeply embedded with us. I think another thing is the enjoyment we have for nature. And so even if I'm in the city and it starts to rain and I can smell the rain, it brings so much memories and so much joy back to us. And I think that's the reward that we live with if we are farmers.
You did spend quite a lot of your career in banks, and I mean, you were at ABSA, you were at FirstRand in Mozambique, and you were in Mozambique at a very interesting time. That economy was beginning to grow, it was opening up, our country was now changing quite quickly. What was that like? I mean, I presume you were kind of helping to finance that expansion.
Yeah, well, listen, they lured me in to be a corporate banker, just to realize that corporate banking in Mozambique is a bit different than South Africa. It was just the start of, I would say, the new phase of Mozambique. Mozambique today is totally different than what we had. I always refer back to the gratitude I have for ABSA, that they did send me to Africa, and I had the opportunity to go to Africa. If I look back in my career, it was one of the best times for us as a family. It was one of the best times for me as an individual in banking. I've learned so much, and it's humble people, it's people with a different mindset, it's people with a different outlook in life, which enriched my life a lot. And then I think what humbled me the most is what they made of what they had, and they literally had nothing. And how they create something out of something that is so small, and in South Africa it would be insignificant. And I've learned that you work with what you have and you turn it into gold. And that's what the Mozambicans told me. So listen, my life and my heart, the Mozambican experience we had as a family living there was absolutely one of the most amazing experiences in my life.
Were you doing a lot of sort of agricultural deals, I'm presuming, there? I mean, that's one of the things that Mozambique really has to offer. I think most of the bananas I've eaten in the last 5 years come from there.
Yeah, listen, we did a lot of deals in Mozambique. A lot of South African farmers popped over the border from Komati side and started to farm in Mozambique. And we funded whatever we could. I could remember I even did crocodiles. And the guy who approached me to fund the crocodile project, he came and he lost his one arm. And before I could even ask, he looked at me and said, no, don't stress. It wasn't a crocodile. I lost it in an accident, so don't go there. So we literally funded whatever we could. Fish was a big one. Bananas, big. It's a big business, and it's a bicycle business where they sell two 30-ton trucks of bananas every day on bicycles. I think one of the largest egg farms I've seen, including South Africa, was in Mozambique. Broilers, also a big business. So Mozambique is not that big in agriculture, South Africa, but big businesses in Mozambique doing agriculture. Sugarcane is also a big one, refined sugar. So it was also one of our bigger clients in Mozambique.
I'm presuming that one of the reasons you did it, and one of the reasons you were asked to do it, was your farming background, right? This kind of banking is, I'm presuming, different to your Santon merger and acquisition.
It was to develop farming. I think at that stage, Absa was still a novice in doing business in Africa. So farming was for us a big focus. And I think the reason why I got the job was because of my farming background, and what we did with farming, especially in agro-processing. Maybe just if I may, a concept about Mozambique. A lot of people ask me, why did I go to Mozambique? Because it was a very poor country. I think it was the 5th poorest on earth at that stage. And why would you go with your family to Mozambique? Now, the reality was that a lot of my counterparts went overseas to Australia and New Zealand, and we just felt we want to stay in Africa. We want to stay in South Africa. And what I did realize is that I don't understand Africa. Although we South Africans, we do not have that much knowledge about Africa. So I choose Africa. I choose to go to Africa, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, because the Africans taught me I think some valuable lessons, which it's only the Africans having those lessons. And so what an experience in having an African mindset, which we sometimes overlook, and we don't give the credit to Africa for their mindset with what they have and what they create is absolutely beautiful. So a total turnaround in my own concept as an individual to understand Africa better. And my take was, if I want to be creative in South Africa and contribute to the South African community, which I loved, I need to understand also the African concept. And today it's working. Today it's helping me a lot.
It's so interesting that because I mean, you're right, a lot of people who had the opportunity went to other places, but I think a lot of people who went into Africa from South Africa seem to have maybe had a much happier experience in many different ways. You did then go, and if I understand your career trajectory, you went from sort of banking to the Pork Producers Association. So you went from money in agriculture to representing an industry. And it's a whole new set of skills. And I wondered how big a change that was. I mean, sure, it's still farming, it's still your passion, but it's a different kind of thing, and maybe some political skills along the way.
Yeah, maybe you missed 7 years before that. I went from corporate to work for myself. And I always say, referred back to it, it was one of the most expensive experiences in my life where I created the most wealth. I came to a point where corporate it felt like I was swallowed in by corporate. We literally started at 4 o'clock in the morning and we ended at 8. And I made a U-turn and I resigned and I went with my 3 daughters and we went to go and live in Nature's Valley in the Western Cape and a small little place. And I just said to myself, I need to find life in a different way. And what a beautiful time, because the investment in my family was a big, I would say, yeah, it's an asset today. And I think that's what Africa taught me, that how valuable community and specifically family is, and the impact in your own life in carrying you in difficult times. Going from banking into representing the pork industry, I would say was one of the greatest leaps I had. I could remember when they phoned me, I said the following. Now I say it was arrogant in my thinking. I said, never in my life. I work with farmers, but to work for a farmer, it's one of the most difficult jobs because they are so diverse in their thinking. And the next thing is pork. Yeah, in my life, pigs, never, man. There's no chance I would be able to do it. And then also thinking back into it, I was a CEO then, and I started as the CEO. What a colorful experience. It is a humble industry, not talking that much, but what a fantastic industry. Technologically, they're in the forerunners in South Africa in industry-wise. If you have a look in the world, they are world leaders in biosecurity. And if I say that's not what I'm saying, it's what the world is saying. So what a fantastic experience. I think what many people are missing is that, and I think that's what made me good while being with them. I never tend to be a politician. I never tend to take the political road. I always took the corporate road and doing business. So we spoke about it yesterday. One of the guys in industry, and I said one of the things that we lack in industry is we can't make a decision because we politically want to be correct. Sometimes you need to make a call and you need to stand for the call that you made. And I think what corporate taught me is to stand for those calls. And the pig industry allowed me to be there. So what a wonderful experience with the pig industry.
We're speaking to Johann Kotzé tonight. He's your shapeshifter, the CEO at Agri SA.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Johann Kotzé is the CEO at Agri SA, is your shapeshifter this evening. Johann, I do need to ask you a question or two about your current job, right? And I've often wondered about managing the politics of farming, because I think for a lot of people who are not farmers, there are probably 2 things that they think about when it comes to this. The one is food prices, and the other is questions and arguments around land. And land in South Africa, as you know better than I, historically is the cause of a lot of pain, or what happened really is the cause of a lot of pain. You must have moments when people are really very angry, very emotional, and with good reason. How do you deal with those moments?
Yeah, we do. I must be honest, I think sometimes it's a bit lonely. And it comes and goes. So it's not that it's every day, but then you get into a season where there's a lot of focus specifically on land, which is very emotional in South Africa. Yeah, I think the way to deal with it, my way with dealing with it is I wake up quite early in the morning, and I really put myself into a different space where I just think through it, and you always come back to a point where you say it's not about you. So I believe sometimes we are very self-centered when we deal with this, when people are attacking you as a person. And I think my way of getting out of it is to not be self-centered and to focus on what needs to happen in South Africa and to have a clear mind regarding this. And if I may, that I don't, if I take it personal, I normally go back and I think the one weapon that I have is forgiveness. And even if I'm in the wrong or somebody else is in the wrong, it's just to say, God, forgive them, and I forgive them. And it helped me a lot as an individual because it is tough. And then you get to the point where you work and you can work through somebody else's mind and kind of understand their minds and the way they think. And kind of put yourself into their stance. And I think out of that, a lot of clarity comes with that, and a lot of wisdom to just how to deal with the situation.
I sometimes, I look at this, and as I think you might know, I followed this as a sort of political reporter and with what I do now. And one of the things I find really difficult, especially at the moment, is that so many people say things that are not true. And they're saying that they're doing that deliberately. I mean, that must be infuriating for you.
Stephen, I went to America, and what an eye-opener. And the first night I felt like battered, and I felt like somebody in a boxing game, and they just got me out, and I was bruised. And I sat down and I went through my mind through this whole concept. But what happened this day? And what came to mind is people spoke about agriculture out of a fear and out of what possibly might go wrong. But they did not testify of who we are. And what came to mind is that I can't change the world itself. And I think social media is good, but also evil in this sense. But what I can do is I can testify about the goodness of what I experienced through the farmers that we have in agriculture. And what started to happen is that testimony is so true that overpowers the lie. And I think what we tend to do with agriculture, specifically in Agri SA, is to talk about the testimonies of farmers. And sometimes it's tough, it's hard, but you kind of push back into that space. The difficult one is that we need to be the voice of reason. And that voice of reason is not a strong voice being radical and to the left or to the right, but it's always middle ground. And so you can't participate and you can't push back in social media when you have these harsh discussions. And that's sometimes tough. But we've learned that the testimony of a farmer, there's no greater voice. And there's no stronger voice regarding certain situations that we are in, and we just need to advocate that a bit more.
Johann, we've got 30 seconds left, I'm afraid, but everyone talks about how the world is changing, and every time I hear the phrase AI and artificial intelligence, I want to scream. Is it changing as quickly in farming as it seems to be changing in other places?
It does. It does. We utilize it a lot. I think precision farming is a big play for us. We have world-class farmers participating on world-class platforms, and AI does play a major role into this. I think quality-wise, productivity is jacked up by AI. So there's a lot of offtake on AI. Still a lot to do, still a far way to go. But as South African farmers, we're well geared and well, I would say, well equipped with AI, and we do understand the concept of, and we utilize it.
That was Johann Kotzé talking about his career journey through the agriculture sector, from his roots as a farmer, becoming an agricultural banker, and now leading the organization that helps farmers in South Africa as CEO of Agri SA.
702.
You're listening to The Money Show's best bits.
You've been with the best bits of The Money Show, a digest of some of the best thoughts, interviews and insights from the show this week. If you'd like to hear more, you can go to our website or your podcast app and search for The Money Show. We'll be back again on Monday. Have a safe weekend.